I knew something was wrong before I even pulled into the driveway. Maybe it was the way the street looked, too clean, too quiet for a Thursday night. Or maybe it was just one of those gut feelings you get after working 16 hours straight under factory lights that make time feel fake. Either way, the second my headlights swept across the concrete in front of my house and I saw an empty space where my truck should have been, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to frill up right there behind the wheel. My old Ford wasn't much to look at. Faded blue paint, rust creeping along the wheel wells, one mirror held together with black tape. But that truck was mine. Paid off, reliable. The kind of truck that starts in January when rich people's luxury SUVs are crying about battery temperatures. And now it was gone. All that was left behind were 2 dark oil stains and a bright orange sticker slapped across my mailbox like somebody marking condemned property. Vehicle, in isolation of residential, a pencil. I just stood there staring at it for a second. Dead tired. Steel-toed boots still on. Lunch pail in my hand, trying to figure out whether I was too exhausted to be angry yet. Then I noticed the toe marks on the curb, and that did it. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it was so ridiculous it didn't feel real. See? I'd lived on Cedar Run Road since before any of those people moved out here pretending they invented the countryside. Back then, it was just scattered homes, old trees, dirt roads, and folks who minded their own business. My father bought this place in 1987 after he got back from working pipeline jobs in Oklahoma. Same driveway, same porch swing, same busted pickup parked in front half the time. Then, about 8 years ago, developers bought the farmland behind my property and built this giant subdivision called Briar Glen Estates, all matching houses, fake stone mailboxes, little decorative trees tied upright with straps like they were too weak to stand on their own. Suddenly, every third person in town had a labradoodle and opinions about property values. At first, they mostly ignored me. I was just the old house sitting on the corner outside the neighborhood gates. But then they built a walking trail along the edge of my property, and apparently my truck became some kind of visual trauma for the joggers. A few months before all this happened, I'd overheard 2 women pushing strollers while I was changing my oil out front. One of them looked over and said, not even quietly, "I can't believe they let people keep junk like that out in the open." Like I was invisible, like I was part of the scenery. I should have known then it was only going to escalate. I walked inside that night, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, and called the number on the sticker. Some kid at the towing company answered chewing fruit into the phone and told me they'd picked up my truck at the request of Briar Glen Homeowners Association. $412 to get it back. Cash only after storage fees hit at midnight. I said, "You towed a vehicle off private property without warning?" And the kid just goes, "Sir, if you got an issue, take it up with the HOA. Oh, I plan to. 10 minutes later, I was driving my neighbor Earl's truck toward the Briar Glen clubhouse with enough anger in my chest to light up the whole county. And the crazy part is, I still had no idea how badly they just screwed themselves. The Briar Glen clubhouse looked exactly how you'd imagine a place run by people who complain professionally. Big white columns out front, soft yellow lights glowing through oversized windows, little fountains bubbling near the entrance like somebody thought they were building a resort instead of a neighborhood 20 minutes outside Knoxville. I parked Earl's muddy truck right across 2 spotless spaces and walked in, still wearing my factory uniform, grease on my sleeves, sweat dried into my collar. Every conversation in the room stopped the second I stepped inside. You could actually feel it, that moment when rich people realize somebody uncomfortable has entered the atmosphere. About a dozen HOA board members sat around a polished oak table with wine glasses and little plates of cheese like they were discussing foreign policy instead of mailbox paint colors. At the center sat Valerie Hensley, president of the HOA, Queen of Briar Glen herself, mid-50s, tennis skirt, pearl earrings, smile sharp enough to cut rope. She looked at me over the rim of her wine glass and said, "Can we help you?" Real calm, real smug. I held up the orange violation notice. "Yeah," I said. "You can tell me why my truck got stolen while I was at work." A couple people shifted in their seats. One guy coughed into his fist, trying not to laugh. Valerie folded her hands like she'd been waiting for this moment all week. "Mr. Grady," she said, "your vehicle was removed due to repeated violations of community appearance standards." I stared at her. "Community standards? I don't live in your neighborhood." That little smile never moved. "Actually," she said, sliding a folder toward herself, "after the county rezoned the adjoining parcels 3 years ago, Your corner lot became subject to the Briar Glen Residential Visibility Covenant. I remember blinking at her because the sentence sounded so stupid I needed a second to translate it into English. You're telling me, I said slowly, that because rich people build houses near me, you can now decide what I park in my own driveway? One of the board members, this bald guy named Richard, who looked permanently sunburned, jumped in. Your truck negatively impacts property values along the trail corridor. Trail corridor. That's what he called the side yard where my dog used to run. I laughed again. But this time there wasn't anything funny in it. That truck carried my father to chemo appointments, I said. It hauled lumber to rebuild my porch after a tornado. It's got 200,000 miles of actual work on it. Meanwhile, half your residents couldn't change a tire if their lives depended on it. Valerie tilted her head like she was talking to a difficult child. Mr. Grady, emotions aside, there are standards in civilized communities. Civilized communities. Man, that one hit me harder than I expected, because suddenly I wasn't standing in a clubhouse anymore. I was 12 years old again, watching my dad come home covered in red clay and engine grease, while people in pressed shirts looked down at him like hard work was contagious. I leaned forward onto the table and said quietly, "You got exactly until tomorrow morning to bring my truck back." Valerie didn't even blink. Or what? That should have been the moment I yelled. It should have been the moment I threatened lawyers or flipped the wine table over or did something dramatic. But instead, I just smiled, and honestly, I think that scared them more. "You'll see," I said. Then I turned around and walked out. Earl was waiting in the parking lot smoking a cigarette when I came back outside. He looked at my face and immediately went, "Oh no, you got that look." "What look?" I asked. "The same look you had when the county tried to take your back acre for that drainage easement." I climbed into the truck. "Funny you mentioned the back acre. Now here's the part none of them knew. 22 years earlier, before Briar Glen existed, before the trails and wine nights and matching SUVs, a telecommunications company approached my father about leasing a small section of our back property for a signal relay tower. Tiny thing compared to the big commercial towers you see near highways, mostly there to strengthen residential coverage in rural zones. Dad signed the lease because the extra monthly income helped pay medical bills after Mom got sick. When he passed, the contract transferred to me. I maintained the access road, handled inspections when needed, and mostly ignored the thing. But over the years, technology changed. Smart homes happened. Wireless garage systems happened. Remote security monitoring happened. And Briar Glen? Well, Briar Glen built their entire fancy little connected paradise around signal strength coming off equipment sitting 50 yards behind my barn. Around 6 the next morning, I walked out there with a cup of coffee while fog still hung low over the field. Birds chirping, grass wet, peaceful as church before service. The control cabinet sat beside the tower, humming softly. I unlocked it and stared at the breaker panel for a long second. Now before anybody gets dramatic in the comments, no, I didn't destroy anything. Didn't cut wires, didn't vandalize equipment. The lease allowed temporary shutdown access during maintenance situations on privately owned land, completely legal. Just inconvenient timing. I took another sip of coffee, then flipped the main relay switch off. The silence afterward was almost funny. By lunchtime, the first signs started appearing. Briar Glen's front security gate froze halfway open, causing traffic to back up all the way onto County Route 8. Around 2 o'clock, Earl called me, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "You watching this?" he said. "Watching what?" "The Facebook page. These people are losing their minds." So naturally, I opened the community forum. It was chaos. Garage doors refusing to open. Smart locks disconnecting. Delivery drivers stranded outside gated entrances. One woman claimed she was trapped in her own backyard because her electronic fence controls stopped responding. Somebody blamed solar flares. Somebody else blamed Russia. By dinnertime, local security companies were driving in and out of Briar Glen nonstop. Techs checked routers, replaced batteries, rebooted systems, all while I sat on my porch eating microwaved lasagna, watching panicked BMWs circle the entrance like confused cattle. And honestly, at first, it felt good, maybe too good, because for the first time since those people arrived, they couldn't buy their way out of inconvenience. They couldn't file a complaint or write a check and instantly force the world back into place. They were stuck dealing with something they couldn't control, just like the rest of us. Then came day 2. That's when things escalated from annoying to ugly. By the second morning, Briar Glen looked less like an upscale neighborhood and more like a disaster drill. People were outside everywhere, pacing driveways with coffee cups and dead remotes in their hands, arguing with customer service through speakerphones, trying to manually force open garage doors they probably never touched before in their lives. I drove past slow on purpose that afternoon and nearly lost it laughing when I saw Richard, the bald HOA guy who lectured me about property values, laying flat on his back under a Mercedes, trying to figure out why the battery had died after being trapped in the garage overnight. But underneath all the comedy, there was something darker brewing too. Residents were turning on each other. The community Facebook page became a full-on war zone. Some blamed the HOA for cutting corners on infrastructure. Others accused neighbors of hacking systems. One guy wrote a 3-paragraph rant claiming the outage was an attack on civilized living. That phrase made me laugh harder than it should have. By day 3, the HOA board finally came to my house. Not just Valerie this time either. The whole squad showed up in press suits and expensive sunglasses like they were arriving to negotiate a hostage situation. I was out front changing the oil on Earl's truck when they rolled up. Valerie stepped out first, trying real hard to keep that polished smile alive. But you could see the panic underneath now. "Mr. Grady," she said, "we need to discuss the ongoing service interruption." I kept turning the wrench without even looking up. "Do you?" Richard spoke next, already sweating through his collar. "This situation is affecting hundreds of residents." "That's so?" "Medical monitoring systems are offline," Valerie added quickly. "Garage access, home security, emergency response systems." I finally stood up and wiped my hands with a rag. "Sounds serious. Maybe y'all shouldn't have stolen my truck." Nobody spoke for a second. Valerie's face tightened. "Your vehicle was lawfully removed under HOA authority." "Funny," I said, "because where I come from, taking a man's property without warning still sounds a lot like stealing." You could tell she wanted to snap back, but the problem was, they needed something from me now, and people like Valerie absolutely hate needing people like me. I walked over to the porch, grabbed a folder from the table beside my chair, and handed it to her. Inside was a neatly typed invoice. Truck towing reimbursement, lost wages from missed shifts, harassment damages, legal consultation fees, and attached behind all that, a brand new telecommunications lease agreement, tripled the monthly rate, 5 years prepaid, permanent exemption from all Briar Glen HOA regulations and enforcement forever. Valerie flips through the pages, her expression getting uglier with every sheet. "This is extortion," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "This is negotiation. Extortion was towing my truck because your joggers didn't like looking at it." Richard stepped forward like he was going to intimidate me physically, which was funny considering the man looked winded from standing upright. "You can't hold an entire neighborhood hostage." I looked him dead in the eye. Seems we both overestimated what we can and can't do. I'll never forget the silence after that. Wind moving through the trees. A dog barking somewhere down the road. Valerie staring at me like she couldn't decide whether to sue me or kill me. Then she handed the folder back and said, cold as ice, "Our attorneys will contact you." I shrugged. "Tell them to bring $412 for my truck." They left furious, tires spinning gravel all the way down my driveway. And for a second, I actually wondered if maybe I'd pushed things too far. Because here's the truth, nobody likes admitting in revenge stories. Sometimes when you finally get power over people who humiliated you, it becomes real easy to keep going long after the point's been made. I sat on my porch that night thinking about my dad. He used to say, "Pride's expensive, son. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor." And honestly, he probably would have told me to flip the breaker back on right then and there. But then I remembered Valerie calling people like me uncivilized. Remembered standing in that clubhouse while they laughed about my truck like it was garbage, and whatever guilt I had left disappeared real fast. So the tower stayed dark. Another week went by before they cracked. By then the maintenance budget was bleeding money from emergency repair calls. Residents were threatening lawsuits against the HOA, and apparently one realtor lost a home sale because buyers thought the neighborhood had infrastructure problems. That one really hurt them. Property values, the sacred religion of suburbia. Valerie came back alone the second time. No wine club, no backup, no pearls, just exhaustion. She stood on my porch holding signed paperwork and said quietly, "We'll agree to your terms." I looked through every page slowly just to make her wait. Then I said, "Add one more thing." Her jaw tightened. "What now?" public written acknowledgement that my property is permanently exempt from all present and future HOA oversight. She closed her eyes for a second like her soul physically left her body, then nodded. 3 hours later, I drove down to the tow yard, got my truck back, and came home right as the sun was setting over Briar Glen. I parked in my driveway exactly where it had always been, sat there with the engine running a while, then walked out to the tower one last time. The breaker clicked back on with this tiny little sound that somehow cost an entire neighborhood its pride. By morning, garage doors opened again. Security cameras came back online. The gates worked. Life returned to normal, mostly. But every now and then, when I drive past those fancy walking trails, people still look away when they see my truck parked out front. And Valerie, she resigned from the HOA 6 months later after losing re-election in spectacular fashion. Turns out people get real angry when their luxury lifestyle disappears for 2 weeks because somebody picked a fight over an old Ford pickup. Now, personally, I still think they deserved it, but maybe some of you won't. Maybe you think I should have handled it differently. Honestly, I want to know. If somebody tried controlling what you did on land your family owned for decades, how far would you go to make your point? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare yourself, subscribe, because trust me, this wasn't even the craziest story I've lived through.